The night I heard my grandson call me a burden, something inside me cracked, quiet, invisible, but deep enough that I felt it echo in my bones. You'd think after 73 years of living, 48 of them married to the same woman, a few cruel words wouldn't mean much. But when they come from the mouth of the boy you used to carry on your shoulders while he laughed like sunshine, they cut deeper than a saw through oak. I didn't make a sound that evening. I just sat in my chair by the window, pretending to read the newspaper while they whispered in the kitchen. The house creaked with the same old rhythm, wood settling, pipes sighing, but their voices were sharp, restless. "Grandpa just sits around all day," Ethan said. His voice, once full of warmth, now carried that brittle arrogance only youth can have. "He doesn't help with bills. He doesn't even cook. He just exists." My son, Mark, said nothing at first. I could hear him rinsing dishes, buying time. Then, quietly, "He's your grandfather, Ethan. Show some respect." Respect. The word floated through the air like something fragile and dying. Ethan scoffed. "Respect doesn't pay the mortgage." I folded my paper and set it on my lap. They didn't know I could hear. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, the truth landed like a weight I couldn't shake off. I'd spent my whole life building things, furniture, homes, a family. And now I'd become something they wanted to move out of the way. Later, when the house was quiet, I stood in the doorway of my old workshop, staring at the dust that had settled on my tools. The smell of cedar and varnish still lingered, faint and familiar. It reminded me of the nights I'd worked late, sanding boards smooth, while my wife, Mary, sang softly in the kitchen. She used to say my hands could fix anything, doors, tables, even bad days. She was wrong about that last one. When she died, I stopped building. Not because I couldn't, but because every sound, the scrape of the saw, the hum of the sander, felt empty without her voice in the next room. So I boxed up my tools, told myself I was too old to keep going, and let the silence take over. That's when Mark asked me to move in. "It'll be good for all of us, Dad," he'd said. "You won't be alone." I believed him. I wanted to. For a while, it was fine. Dinners together, laughter, my grandson showing me his college projects. But slowly, the warmth thinned out, like soup stretched too far. They got busier, I got quieter, and now, apparently, I was just a burden. The next morning, I made breakfast like I always did. Bacon, eggs, toast. Ethan walked in, half awake, scrolling his phone. He didn't look up when I said good morning. "Your favorite," I said, sliding the plate toward him. He grunted. "I'm not hungry." "Then at least take a piece of toast. You've got a long day ahead." He sighed, grabbed one, and muttered, "You don't have to act like everything's fine, Grandpa." "What do you mean?" He finally looked at me. "I heard Mom and Dad talking. They're thinking of selling the house. We can't afford to stay here forever and, well, it's not fair to you either." "Not fair to me?" I asked, though I already knew where this was going. "Yeah, you need something smaller, easier to manage." Easier to manage. I smiled at that. When I was 20, I built this house from the ground up. Every nail, every beam, every inch of wood cut by hand. I'd raised Mark here, buried Mary's rose garden out back, fixed every window that dared to crack in winter. And now it was too much to manage. Ethan hesitated. "They said maybe we could sell it before winter, move closer to the city. You'd get your own place, something quiet." Quiet. They already thought of me as background noise. I nodded slowly, pretending it didn't sting. "That sounds practical." He relaxed, thinking I agreed. "Yeah, it'll be better for everyone." Better for everyone except the ghosts that lived in these walls. When he left for work, I sat alone at the table, staring at the sunlight bleeding through the lace curtains Mary had sewn. I could almost hear her voice again, gentle, teasing. "Don't let them forget where they came from, Tom." "I won't," I whispered. That afternoon, I drove into town. The old hardware store still smelled like sawdust and oil. The owner, Joe, looked up from behind the counter. "Well, I'll be damned. If it isn't Tom Miller, haven't seen you here in ages." "Been a while," I said, picking up a pack of sandpaper. My hands shook slightly as I turned it over. "Guess I'm getting back to work." He grinned. "About time. What are you building?" "Not sure yet," I said. "Maybe a reminder." That night, after everyone went to bed, I unlocked the workshop. The tools were cold. the air heavy with the weight of years I'd wasted feeling small. I plugged in the lamp, the light spilling across the workbench like sunrise. I didn't know exactly what I'd make. Maybe a chest, maybe a table. But I knew it would be mine. Something solid, something that would outlast the whispers and the pity. As the first line of sawdust curled off the blade, I felt something I hadn't in years. Purpose. The next day, Mark told me the realtor was coming by next week. Just to get an appraisal, he said gently. No decisions yet. I nodded. Of course. You've got to do what's best. But inside, a different plan was already forming. Because if they thought they were selling my home without understanding what it really meant, they were in for a surprise. A big one. And this time, I wasn't going to warn them. You can tell when someone's already decided to erase you. They start speaking softer, slower, like your fragile glass that might crack if they say too much. That's how my son started talking. To me, the week after the realtor's visit. Dad, he said one morning, holding a cup of coffee he didn't seem to want to drink. We're just getting a sense of the market, okay? No pressure. I smiled. No pressure, I repeated, like a man being told not to worry about the noose around his neck. The realtor was young, slick-haired, smiling too wide. He wore cologne that smelled like car sales and promises. Lovely old place, he said, walking through the rooms, tapping walls, taking pictures. A bit dated, but with the right staging. He meant removing every trace of me, of Mary, of the life we'd lived. The floral curtains, the photographs, the heavy oak furniture I'd made with my own hands. All too outdated. Mark followed him around, nodding politely, pretending this was a business deal instead of a betrayal. Ethan trailed behind, hands in his pockets, eyes on his phone. I stayed quiet. That's what they expected of me, the quiet old man who couldn't keep up. But silence has power when it hides a plan. After they left, I walked out to the garden. The rose bushes were bare now, winter creeping in early. Mary's garden. She'd planted them the year Ethan was born, said she wanted him to grow up knowing beauty takes patience. She'd been right. Those roses had survived storms that tore the roof clean off the shed. Now they were being cut down. For curb appeal. That night, I sat at my workbench again. The lamp cast a soft glow over the scattered tools, and I could feel the house breathing around me, the wood settling, the pipes groaning, the quiet heartbeat of a place that had seen everything. I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. When you spend your life building things, you learn that strength isn't in the hammer or the nails. It's in knowing what to keep standing and what to let fall. So I started sorting through the old boxes in the corner, blueprints, receipts, photographs. I found one from 1979, the year I'd finished building the foundation. My handwriting was on the bottom, Lot 23, deed in full, Thomas Miller. That's when it hit me like a jolt of current. The house wasn't just in my name. The land was too, every inch of it. The renovations Mark had made over the years didn't change that. The papers were never transferred. I'd kept the original deed tucked away all this time. They thought the house was theirs. They'd forgotten who built the ground beneath it. I ran my finger along the edge of the paper, yellowed with time, but still legal, still binding. Mary, I whispered, I think we just found our leverage. The next day I called an old friend, Larry Peterson, a lawyer I used to help with cabinetry back when he was starting his practice. He owed me more than one favor. Tom, he laughed when he answered. Been a while. What can I do for you? I need to confirm a property title, I said. He paused. You're not in trouble, are? You? Not me, I said. But trouble's coming to my doorstep, and I'd rather meet it standing. I brought him the papers that afternoon. He looked them over carefully, adjusting his glasses. Well, I'll be damned, he said finally. You're the sole owner, Tom. House, land, everything. Hasn't been updated since 1980. You never transferred title to your son? No reason to, I said. Didn't think I needed to. Larry chuckled. Good thing you didn't. Legally, you're sitting on a gold mine. They can't sell a dime of this without your consent. I leaned back, the weight lifting off my chest. That's what I needed to hear. He looked at me curiously. You planning to fight them? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I'm planning to teach them. That night, the air was sharp with the smell of oncoming snow. I could hear the wind pressing against the windows as I sat at the workbench, carving again. This time with purpose. I was making something new. A box of dark walnut, polished smooth, with tiny brass hinges that caught the lamplight. On the lid, I carved the words, "For the future." Inside, I placed the deed, wrapped in parchment, along with a letter I'd written by hand. The kind of letter you only write once in your life. It started, "To whoever remembers where this house came from." By the time I finished, the clock struck midnight. My fingers ached, but my heart felt steady. I sealed the box and hid it beneath the floorboards of the workshop, a secret that belonged to the house itself. 2 days later, Mark knocked on my door. "Dad, we've got an offer." I pretended to be surprised. "That was fast," he nodded. "The realtor says we should take it. It's more than we expected." "More than you expected," I said quietly. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met his eyes. "It means before you sell a man's home, you might want to ask if he's ready to let it go." "Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. That word again. Everything with them was about convenience, comfort, efficiency. "You think this place is just wood and nails," I said, "but every inch of it has a story. Every board knows my hands." Ethan, who had been standing behind him, muttered, "Here we go again." I looked at him, my grandson, my own blood, and saw nothing of Mary's gentleness in his face, just impatience. "You'll understand one day," I said softly. "Maybe," he said, "but right now we need something practical." Practical. Always the word they use to make cruelty sound like reason. "Then, let's be practical," I said. "You want to sell this house? Fine. Let's see if you can." Mark blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll let you handle the papers, the realtor, the offer. Let's see how far you get before you hit something you didn't expect." He looked uneasy, but agreed. "Okay, Dad, we'll handle it." As they left, I watched through the window, the snow starting to fall in thick, slow flakes. The house seemed to breathe with me, old but unbroken. In the coming days, they'd find out exactly what I meant, because a home built by love doesn't sell easy, and I was just getting started. The first real snow of the season came that Sunday, thick, slow flakes that muffled the world until even the wind forgot how to shout. I sat by the window, a mug of coffee warming my hands, watching the old maple tree bend beneath its white coat. Every winter, that tree reminded me of Mary, strong roots, graceful under pressure, still beautiful even when everything else turned cold. Mark and Ethan were out with the realtor that morning. They didn't invite me, of course. They thought I'd only slow them down, embarrass them with sentimental talk. I didn't mind. Let them walk through my life with their polished shoes and city plans. Let them measure walls they didn't build. By noon, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Through the frosted glass, I saw them standing outside, stamping snow from their boots, talking with the realtor. They looked nervous. Good. When they came in, Mark's tone was cautious, almost rehearsed. "Dad, we ran into a little confusion with the paperwork." I raised an eyebrow. "Confusion?" Ethan, trying to sound helpful, said, "It's just, there's some issue with the title. They couldn't find the transfer documents in the registry." I sipped my coffee. "Because there aren't any." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "I never transferred ownership," I said. "This house and land are still mine." Silence, the kind that hums like electricity just before lightning strikes. Ethan looked between us. "Wait, so you own it? Like, still?" "Like I always have," I said calmly. Mark set his jaw. "Dad, that can't be right. You said years ago—" "I said you could live here," I interrupted. "Not that you owned it." His voice rose, frustration cracking through his polite tone. "So, what are you saying? That we can't sell?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." He exhaled hard, rubbing his forehead. "Dad, come on. We're drowning in mortgage debt. The house needs work. This place is falling apart." I smiled. Funny thing about houses. They only fall apart when people stop caring for them. Ethan rolled his eyes. "So what, Grandpa? You're just going to sit here until it collapses? You'd rather hold us back than let us move forward?" I set down my mug. "Ethan," I said softly, "do you know what this place cost me?" He shrugged. "You built it forever ago. Can't be worth much now." "Not money," I said. "Cost." He frowned. "What?" "It cost me 30 years of my back. 20 winters without a vacation. a war injury that never quite healed. It cost your grandmother her hands from tending, up with that garden, her knees from kneeling in the dirt. Every wall, every nail. We traded pieces of ourselves for it. That's the price of something real. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Mary's clock, still running steady after all these years. Finally, Mark sighed. Look, Dad, I get it. I really do. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. Times change. We can't live off memories. I nodded slowly. You're right. Memories don't pay bills, but they build character. And character pays for a lot more than you think. Ethan scoffed. That's not how the world works anymore. I looked at him, really looked. The expensive watch, the tired eyes from a job he hated, the way his phone was always in his hand like a lifeline. He thought he was free, but I could see the chains in plain sight. Then, maybe the world's broken, I said quietly. That night, I went to the workshop again. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath, but the familiar smell of sawdust felt like home. I opened the hidden box, the one with the deed and my letter, and read over what I'd written. It felt right, but incomplete. So, I added a few more lines. If you're reading this, it means you've forgotten what this house was built for. It wasn't for profit. It wasn't for comfort. It was for family. And if you sell it for money, you'll lose something you can't ever buy back: belonging. I sealed it again, set it back under the floorboard, and brushed away the dust. The next morning, a woman knocked on the door. The buyer, apparently. Tall, elegant, wearing boots that probably cost more than my truck. Mr. Miller, she said politely, I just wanted to see the property again before we finalize the offer. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Come in. She walked through the house, smiling faintly at the woodwork, the old beams, the fireplace mantel. You built this yourself? I did. It's incredible craftsmanship. Her voice softened, almost reverent. They don't build like this anymore. No, I said. They don't. She ran her hand along the banister. It feels alive. That's because it is, I said. Every board here remembers something. She paused, looking at me curiously. You really love this place? I do. She hesitated. Then why are they selling it? I smiled. They think it's just a house. She tilted her head. And you? It's my heart, I said simply. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she exhaled softly and smiled. You know, Mr. Miller, I think my husband and I will keep looking. This house already belongs to someone. I nodded, gratitude catching in my throat. Thank you for seeing that. When she left, the cold air followed her out, and I closed the door slowly. That evening, Mark came home furious. What did you say to her, Dad? She backed out. I met his, anger with calm. Nothing but the truth. Do you realize what you've done? Yes, I said. I've reminded someone what a home is worth. He stared at me, speechless. Ethan stormed off to his room, muttering, You just can't let anyone move on, can you? But I could tell, behind his anger, there was something else, something like doubt. Later that night, when the house was dark, I heard footsteps in the hall. Ethan's. They stopped outside the workshop. The door creaked open slightly, then closed again. He didn't come in, but I knew he'd looked. Maybe he saw the light still burning on the workbench. Maybe he saw the half-finished chest I'd been carving, the one I planned to give him someday. Maybe, just maybe, he started to wonder why I kept building when everyone else had stopped believing in things that last. The snow fell heavier that night. The world outside disappeared beneath it, but inside, something small had begun to thaw. The storm rolled in before sunrise, the kind that wraps the house in white silence and makes every window glow faintly blue. I woke before anyone else, brewed my coffee, and stood in the kitchen watching the snow pile up against the porch. The world outside looked soft, untouched, like it was offering a fresh start I didn't quite know how to take. Ethan stumbled in a half hour later, hair messy, wearing one of those sweatshirts that cost more than my monthly gas bill. He stopped when he saw me, awkward, uncertain. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Hesitation, maybe guilt. Morning, I said. Morning, he mumbled. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. For a moment, we just stood there listening to the quiet hum of the heater. Then, carefully, he said, I went into the workshop last night. I didn't look at him. I know. The floor creaks outside that door. Always has. He flinched. Sorry. I wasn't snooping or anything. I heard the light. I nodded. And? He hesitated. What are you building, Grandpa? I smiled faintly. You tell me. He frowned. It looked like a chest, a wooden one, with carvings. I saw words on the lid, but I couldn't make them out. For the future, I said. What does that mean? I set down my mug. It means I'm leaving something behind that won't end up in a landfill or a spreadsheet. He didn't answer right away. He was studying me, like he was trying to reconcile the man in front of him with the version he had built in his mind, the useless old man who sat quietly by the window. Can I see it? He asked finally. I nodded toward the hallway. It's there if you want to look. He went. I heard the door creak open, then silence for a long time. When he came back, his expression had changed. There was something softer about it, less armor, more confusion. You made that by hand? He asked. Like everything else around here? It's beautiful. I didn't know you could do that kind of work. I almost laughed. Didn't know? You used to sit on my lap while I built tables. You'd steal the nails and stick them in your pockets like treasure. He looked down, embarrassed. Guess I forgot. People do, I said. It's easy to forget the hands that built your world when the world gets loud. He was quiet for a while, staring into his coffee. Then, almost a whisper, Dad's really upset about the sale falling through. I know. He said you're trying to make a point. Maybe I am. About what? I met his eyes. About what's worth keeping. He frowned. It's just a house, Grandpa. No, I said softly. It's the story of everything we are. You take that away, and you lose your anchor. You start drifting, chasing things that don't last. You know what happens to people who drift too long? He shook his head. They forget who they are. He didn't have a reply. I didn't expect one. Sometimes truth needs silence to sink in. By afternoon, the snow had stopped. The world outside looked like a painting. Pale sky, dark trees, a quiet kind of beauty that made you feel both small and safe. Mark came home early from work, still tense. Dad, he said, we need to talk. I glanced at Ethan, who took the hint and slipped upstairs. Mark sat down at the table, rubbing his temples. I can't keep doing this. The bank's breathing down my neck, the heating bills are insane, and now we've lost the only serious buyer we had. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. He sighed. I know you think I'm being ungrateful, but I'm trying to keep everyone afloat. I can't do that if you're standing in the way. I leaned forward. Mark, when did I become the enemy? He blinked, caught off guard. You're not. Yes, I am. You talk about this house like it's an obstacle, not a legacy. You talk about me like I'm another bill you have to pay. When did family start meaning burden to you? His jaw tightened. You don't understand. Things are different now. Money's tight, costs are high, and Ethan needs roots, I said sharply. Not another mortgage. He stood abruptly. You think I don't want that? You think I don't miss how things used to be? But we can't live on memories, Dad. You're stuck in a world that doesn't exist anymore. I rose too, slower but steadier. And you're chasing a world that never will. We stood there, two men with the same blood but different clocks. He looked away first. I can't talk about this anymore. When he left, the door slammed harder than he meant it to. Later that night, I found Ethan in the workshop again. He was sitting on the stool by my bench, the chest open before him, his fingers tracing the carvings on the lid. Grandpa, he said quietly, can I help? With what? Whatever you're building next. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My throat tightened in that painful way it does when your heart's full and fragile all at once. You sure you've got the patience for it? I asked. He nodded. Teach me. So I did. We started with small things. Sanding the edges, fitting the joints, learning the rhythm of the work. I watched him struggle, curse under his breath, laugh when the pieces finally came together. It reminded me of the boy he used to be, the one who believed anything could be fixed if you worked at it long enough. For the first time in years, the workshop felt alive again. The scrape of sandpaper, the hum of effort, the quiet bond that doesn't need words. When we finished for the night, he looked around the room, smiling faintly. I get it now, he said. Get what? Why you never wanted to leave, I smiled. It's not about wanting to stay, Ethan. It's about not running from what still matters. He nodded slowly. Maybe Dad just forgot that. Then it's our job to remind him. Outside, the snow had stopped completely. The moonlight spilled across the yard, silvering the frozen roses. I put my hand on Ethan's shoulder. Tomorrow, I said, we start building something he can't ignore. He looked at me curiously. What do you mean? I smiled. You'll see. Because I'd already decided, if they wanted to sell this house, I was going to show them its real value, not in dollars, but in legacy. And for that, I needed more than wood and nails. I needed to rebuild the family itself. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and sawdust. 2 scents that, for me, have always meant something alive was happening. I woke early, long before Mark stirred, and found Ethan already waiting in the workshop, bundled in a hoodie, rubbing his hands together against the cold. Couldn't sleep, he said. Kept thinking about what you said last night. I handed him a hammer. Then let's make that thought useful. He grinned, and for a brief moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who'd follow me around with a toy saw and ask if he could help build the sky. God, he used to say that every time I worked on the roof. Grandpa, are we building the sky today? This time, though, we weren't fixing shingles or frames. We were building something much deeper, something that might just save what was left of our family. Over the next few days, we worked quietly. Mark assumed we were just keeping busy, and I let him think that. He didn't ask questions, too buried in bills and phone calls and his own exhaustion to notice what was happening in the back of the house. Ethan, however, noticed everything. He started asking about Mary, how we met, how she'd picked the paint for each room, how she'd insisted we plant a rose bush for every year of our marriage. By the end of those stories, he was the one bringing up the old photos, brushing off the dust, arranging them on the bench beside our tools. Grandma built this place as much as you did, he said one night, looking at a photo of her laughing in the half-finished kitchen, hammer in hand. She did, I said, maybe more. He hesitated, then added softly, I never really knew her. No, I said, but you're starting to. We were restoring something together, not just wood, but memory. By the end of the week, our project began to take shape. It wasn't just one chest anymore. It was a series, 4 boxes, each carved from wood I'd saved over the years. Walnut, oak, pine, maple, one for every generation that had lived under this roof. On each lid, we engraved a word: faith, work, love, legacy. When Ethan asked what they were for, I told him, proof. Of what? That this family wasn't built on money. It was built on hands, on trying, on care. He nodded, and something like pride flickered in his eyes. Then let's make them perfect. We spent hours polishing the edges, fitting hinges, sanding until our fingers were raw. When we finished, I lined the boxes on the workbench and felt Mary's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. She would have smiled at what we'd done, at the way the boy who'd once called me a burden now stood beside me, covered in sawdust, grinning like he'd just remembered what family feels like. But I knew the real test was still ahead. Mark. That Saturday evening, we heard his car in the driveway. Ethan looked nervous. Should we tell him? No, I said. We'll show him. Mark walked into the kitchen, looking tired, his phone glued to his ear. He ended the call and sighed. Dad, the realtor's pushing for an update. We can't keep stalling. Either we sell or we... Come with me, I interrupted. He blinked. What? Come see something. He followed us down the hallway, muttering under his breath. When I opened the workshop door, he stopped cold. What is this? I gestured toward the row of boxes, the tools, the open photos, the scattered sawdust that glittered under the lamplight like frost. This, I said, is your inheritance. He frowned. Dad, we don't have time for... Look closer. Reluctantly, he stepped forward. His eyes lingered on the carvings. Faith, work, love, legacy. He ran a hand over the surface of one, feeling the grooves of the letters. You made these? We did, Ethan said quietly. Mark turned to him, surprised. You helped? Ethan nodded. Every day this week. Mark studied us both, confused and weary. Why? Because, I said, you were about to sell a house without ever understanding what you had. These boxes hold the story of this place. Every scrap of what made us who we are. He looked skeptical. What do you mean? I opened the first box. Faith. Inside was Mary's old Bible, the one she used to read at the kitchen table every morning. The pages were worn thin, notes scrawled in the margins, prayers tucked between verses. Mark's breath caught. I haven't seen this since I was a kid. She read from it the day we broke ground, I said. Said we weren't just building walls, we were building a promise. I opened the next box. Work. Inside lay my hammer, my calloused gloves. A yellowed photo of the house half built with Mark, age 6, handing me nails in the sunlight. Mark's eyes softened. I remember that day. Good, I said. Then you remember what work used to mean. Next was love. Inside, a faded scarf, still carrying a trace of Mary's perfume, wrapped around the first letter she'd ever written me. Ethan leaned closer, and I saw the emotion flicker across his face. She was beautiful, he murmured. She still is, I said, everywhere in this house. Finally, I opened Legacy. Inside sat the deed, the letter, and one photograph. Our family, 4 generations, smiling in front of this very house. Mark stared at the deed. Dad, what's this? It's yours, I said softly, when you're ready to understand it. He frowned. What do you mean? You've been trying to sell something you already own, I said. Not on paper, but in blood. You don't need to prove your worth with money, Mark. You just need to remember it. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Mark turned to Ethan. You knew about this? Yeah, Ethan said. Grandpa taught me. We built it together. Mark's shoulders sank. He sat down on the stool, rubbing his face. God, I've been so blind. I put a hand on his shoulder. You've been busy surviving. Happens to all of us. He looked up, eyes damp. Dad, I don't deserve this. I smiled gently. None of us do. That's what makes it worth keeping. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, healing. Later, as Mark and Ethan went through the boxes again, I stepped outside. The night air was crisp, the snow glowing faintly in the moonlight. I looked up at the house, my house, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Inside, I could hear them talking softly, laughing even. The sound wrapped around me like a blanket. Maybe I'd built more than a home after all. Maybe I'd built a second chance. Morning light poured through the kitchen window, like gold through stained glass, warm and forgiving. The storm had passed. The world outside looked clean, reborn, like everything broken might just have another chance. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee, listening to the sound of laughter drifting down the hallway. For the first time in a long while, it wasn't a memory. It was real. Mark and Ethan were in the workshop again. I could hear the thud of the hammer, the low hum of conversation, the kind that comes from 2 people finding their way back to each other. Every sound was a balm. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Maybe all I ever wanted wasn't for them to understand me, but to understand what made them. They came in an hour later, both covered in sawdust, cheeks red from the cold. Ethan was grinning like a boy again. We finished it, he said. Finished what? I asked. Mark set a small wooden plaque on the table. I ran my hand over the carved letters. The Miller home, built 1979, rebuilt 2025. Your grandson's idea, Mark said quietly. He thought we should leave a mark for the next ones who live here. Ethan looked at me, shy but proud. It's for Grandma, too. I swallowed hard. She'd like that. Mark sat across from me. His face looked older today, softer somehow, stripped of the pride that had weighed him down for years. Dad, I owe you an apology. No, I said gently. You owe yourself forgiveness. He shook his head. I forgot what this place meant. I got so caught up in debt and plans and expectations. I thought selling it would fix everything. But it turns out this house was never the problem. I smiled. It never is. It's the people who forget what home feels like. He exhaled, a long breath that seemed to carry years of tension with it. We're not selling, Dad. I called the realtor this morning. I nodded. I figured you might. He looked almost boyish when he added, we're going to restore it instead. The roof, the wiring, the porch. Make it solid again. Good, I said. Do it right this time. Ethan leaned in. And, Grandpa, we want you to stay, not just in the house, with us, for as long as you want. I chuckled softly. Where else would I go? My name's on the deed, remember? They laughed, but there was truth beneath it, the kind of truth that feels like healing. We spent the rest of that morning walking through each room, planning repairs, telling stories. Ethan wanted to fix the staircase. Mark wanted to repaint the living room. I just wanted to see them build something together again. In the afternoon, I went out to the garden. The snow was melting, revealing patches of dark soil where Mary's roses had once bloomed. I knelt down, old knees protesting, and started clearing away the frost-bitten stems. Ethan joined me quietly. Grandpa, he said, can we plant new ones in spring? I smiled, brushing the dirt from my hands. We'll plant plenty. Red for love, yellow for hope, white for memory. Mary always said the garden should tell a story. What's ours gonna say? He asked. That we remembered, I said. He nodded, thoughtful. You know, I used to think legacy meant money, jobs, titles. It's easy to make that mistake, I said. The world tells you value comes with a price tag, but real legacy? I tapped his chest right above his heart. Starts in here. What you build with your hands only lasts if you build it with your soul, too. He smiled faintly. Guess I've got a lot to learn. You're learning, I said. That's what matters. When the sun began to set, the three of us gathered by the fireplace. Mark poured coffee for everyone. No more awkward silence between us. No more unspoken resentment. Just family. Ethan handed me a folded piece of paper. I found this in the workshop, he said. It was my letter, the one I'd tucked inside the legacy box. My handwriting looked older than I remembered. The ink slightly faded. I started to tell him to put it back, but he shook his head. Read it, he said softly. So I did. To whoever remembers where this house came from, if you're holding this, it means you forgot what we built it for. This home wasn't made to be sold. It was made to be lived in. It's where laughter should echo and forgiveness should stay longer than anger. It's where family learns to start over. If you've lost your way, come back here. The door is always open. When I finished, the room was quiet. Ethan was staring at the flames, blinking fast. Mark wiped his eyes and said, You always knew how to say things that hurt in the right way. I chuckled. That's what fathers are for. Night fell slowly, wrapping the house in that familiar warmth I'd almost forgotten. The same creaks in the floorboards, the same hum of the pipes, the same heart beating in the walls. Before bed, I went out to the porch one last time. The stars were sharp and clear, the air cold enough to sting my lungs. I looked out at the yard, the half-buried rose bushes, the old oak, the light glowing softly through the windows, and whispered, We did it, Mary, they remember now. For the first time in years, I felt her there beside me, not as a ghost, but as presence, a warmth in the air, a peace that didn't ask for words. When I went back inside, Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket around his shoulders. Mark was in the workshop, oiling the tools like I used to. I turned off the light, the house sighing gently as if it too was finally resting. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was ours again. And maybe that's what legacy really is. Not something you leave behind, but something you leave within. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't a fortune. It's a home that still knows your name.